Hey everybody, good to see you again. Don't know what it's like where you're at and when you're listening to this, but as of today here in Barnesville, it's actually been a really cool day. It's been pretty a little bit overcast, which has broken the heat, which is really nice. It's been scorching here about the last week or so, and having the break today. We've had a little rain. It's been a little rumbly, some thunder showers, that kind of thing. It's been really nice. Much better than the 95 degree, 115 degree heat index days we've had about the last week. I hope this message finds you well and in good spirits. We're about a week and a half before I have to go back, about 2.5 weeks until classes start. We're getting ready to gear up for some new things, and I hope we'll be able to announce some really cool stuff coming up here in the next little bit. I thought I'd continue to talk a little bit about metaphors or images used for the church. And the last couple of times I've talked about some ideas of church in Judaic thought, and I want to build on those because one of those ideas turns out to be a really important idea in the New Testament church. And so I thought I would start there. And I think there are about 3 big pictures I want to talk a little bit about. I don't know if this is going to turn into a 2-parter for this or not, but the first image that I want to talk about, which is used pretty frequently, all of the major New Testament writers use this image somewhere in their writing, is that of the church as temple. And hold on just a second here. I need to move my laptop. That's better. I'm bumping it and it causes it to wiggle. I'm sure that was weird for you. But anyway, back to this. The church as temple is an idea that this church growing out of Judaism and these followers who believe themselves to be Jews first. And then as Gentiles came into the church and as the church began to expand its vision for what it meant to be the people of God, this church continued to use a very Old Testament metaphor. In the Old Testament, of course, the place where God resided once the people had settled in Jerusalem, or the New Peace, is what the name of the city actually means, was the temple. And that temple sort of began to symbolize the center of Jewish religious life. And in some ways, unfortunately, there were times when, as the Jewish people sort of lost the plot, as Rob Bell likes to say, and they began to sort of forget or mistake what was about. The temple became almost an idol at times. That because the temple was in Jerusalem, that's the only place where God was. And so as we know and as we teach in Christianity, when Christ is crucified, the curtain that separated the place of the most holy from the place of the holy was rent from top to bottom. It was torn. And in Christian thought and in Christian theology, that symbolizes that God has left the specific place in the Old Testament and has gone out to live amongst his people. And so the New Testament writers, I think, do a very important thing, which is they talk about church as temple. And so I wanted to read a couple of those passages because, like I say, all 3 of the major New Testament writers, at least in the epistles, mention this. Peter, Paul, and John. All of them use this imagery, this symbolism, to deeply talk about their image or their picture of the church. So the first one I want to do, if I can read from the book of 1 Peter, this is chapter 2, and I'm going to read from about, chapter 2, verse 4 through about verse 10. Maybe not quite that far, but if I can start, it says, "As you come to him, the living stone, rejected by men but chosen by God, and precious to him, you also, like living stones, are being built into a spiritual house, a holy priesthood, offering spiritual sacrifices acceptable to God through Jesus Christ. For in Scripture it says, See, I lay a stone in Zion, a chosen and precious cornerstone, and the one who trusts in him will never be put to shame. Now to you who believe, the stone is precious, but to those who do not believe, the stone the builders rejected has become the capstone, and the stone that causes men to stumble, and a rock that makes them all fall. They stumble because they disobey the message, which is also what they were destined for. But you are a chosen nation, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, a people belonging to God, that you may declare the praises of him who called you out of darkness into his wonderful light. Once you were not a people, but now you are the people of God. Once you had not received mercy, but now you have received mercy. So there you get a sense of Peter speaking, by the way, to displaced Jews who have become Christians or who have seen themselves as Jews who accepted the returned and risen Messiah, that they have become that temple, and they are the priesthood of that temple, that it is in this collection, this gathering, this congregation of people that the temple itself still exists. And it is not that God resides in one place, but that it is God that resides in his church, and it is the church that offers spiritual and living sacrifices to God. The Apostle Paul writes, and interestingly enough, to Ephesus, which was the largest city in the same area that Peter was writing to, he writes to them, consequently, you are no longer foreigners and aliens, but fellow citizens with God's people and members of God's household, built on the foundation of the apostles and prophets, with Christ himself as the chief cornerstone, there again echoing what Peter had written. In him, the whole building is joined together and rises to become a holy temple in the Lord. And in him, you too are being built together to become a dwelling in which God lives by his Spirit. So there you see Paul making that even more clear. And the thing that's very interesting is it's in this region. It's when Peter writes to the churches in Asia Minor, when Paul writes to the church in Ephesus, and as we'll find out as John writes to these same churches in and around Ephesus, that this symbolism of temple is so important. And I think in part it's because Ephesus has huge temples, and so it's a piece of imagery that anyone in that region, with its emphasis on these great temples to Athena or Artemis, would have really recognized that it's not these stone temples, it's not these places, but it's you. You're the stones, brick by brick, that are built to make this temple, to make this holy place where God exists. And that's really important. The final place that I want to read is actually out of the Apocalypse, the Revelation, if you want to call it by its more commonly known name. And it's John writing to the church in Philadelphia. And he says in writing the prophecy given to him by Christ, John writes, he says, I am coming soon, the I am being Christ himself. Hold on to what you have so that no one will take your crown. Him who overcomes I will make a pillar in the temple of God. Never again will he leave it. I will write on him the name of my God and the name of the city of my God, the new Jerusalem which is coming down out of heaven from my God. And I will write on him my new name. He who has an ear, let him hear what the Spirit says to the churches. And so here, it's again this powerful idea that it is to those who are faithful to this image and this mission of God that they will become pillars in the temple. Again, it is this church that is being built up and then brought together, in a sense, in a place where that is where God is going to reside. So when we talk about what is church in the New Testament, we are in a sense the temple. We are the place where God resides, and we are the place where sacrifice must take place. We are not a place that is this sort of I don't know what to call it, this place of entitlement. It is a place of service. We are, when you think of the temple, as where services and sacrifices were offered, not where, it was never meant to be this place that was self-satisfied. And every time it became that, God calls it out, and God prophetically speaks to the people in power, saying, you are not acceptable in my sight. Well, as a church, the same holds for us as we're to talk about temples. So I'll continue this discussion. We're already 10 minutes in, believe it or not. I'll continue this discussion next time Until then, grace, peace, abide.